Hello, and welcome to the space between ideas. Welcome to part B of today's experience. Hello, and welcome to the space between ideas, and welcome to part B of the experience. Let's do cursor. So, yeah, I finally got the thing to access my Supabase database. Why? Because the whole point was that I needed this, I needed cursor to look at the PRD and also to look at the database. So it says, based on the check, I can tell you about the Supabase database, existing tables, projects, table exists and is accessible, history, table exists and is accessible. There's more tables than that. What are you talking about? Module entries, table is missing. This suggests that your database is partially set up according to PRD, but the module entry, which I can show you current structure of the existing tables. Yeah, so I said, now that you have an understanding of the project based on the database setup and also the understanding of the project from the PRD, we need to do two things before we begin the project. First, we need to break the project down into milestones where we design and create foundational elements and then build out the features in a logical way. We also need to create React components that can be reused and that can make sense based on the needs of the UI and the UX and the database. I'll help you break down the project into logical milestones, create the component structure, and aligns with the PRD requirements in the existing database schema. I don't think it understands the database. Foundation and infrastructure setup. So we got sprint 1, and then we got sprint 2, we got sprint 3. Oh, hold on. Let's look deeper into the sprints. Okay, so for some reason it wants to do a module entry. I don't know why. Verify the schema aligned with the PRD, authentication framework. So that's the login signup components, project state management, core UI framework navigation, project management, creation, renaming, duplication, add project, deletion, confirmation, history, implement history tracking component, make ordering mechanism, build module. Yeah, a lot of this is from the PRD. Module framework, build reusable modular container, create common module navigation patterns, implement autosave functionality, implement vision of the module question sequence, create data touch-based module with okay. Scoreboard, objective scoreboard module. Okay, so I got another question. So when you mentioned the existing tables, you only mentioned projects and history. There are many more tables in Supabase. Should I copy and paste something from the Supabase website so that you can understand the entire database for this project, or can you do that? I don't want to start on the sprints until you prove to me that you have a detailed understanding of the complete structure of the database I set up in Supabase. Okay, so we're going to go to the table editor. Okay, I'm in the table editor. And for each table in your database, click on the name, table name. You'll see the column structure with the data types and constraints. You can copy this information manually by listing each column and its data type and constraints. For relationship of foreign keys in the table, check the relationship indicator, database relationships. For RLS policy, you can go there. The simplest way would be to create a text document with the structure of each table, listing table name, columns, copy and paste the document here. Can I get Supabase to create that document? Unfortunately, Supabase doesn't have built-in. You would need to manually compile this information going through each table. However, there's a few approaches that might be easier. SQL query. You could run an SQL query in the SQL query that would output the table information, for example. Okay, so it wants me to copy this. Table name, column, delete, null, column from screenshot method. Take a screenshot of your table definition from the table editor. Manual document, third-party tools. Okay. So if I use the SQL query method, it will output what you need. Is there any possibility it will cause a problem with the database? Okay. All right, so let's just jump over to Supabase. Go to the SQL editor. We're going to do a new snippet, paste. I'm going to run it. Okay. Now, how do I? Here's the result. Output list of your. Yeah, but how do I copy it now? Yes. Okay, but how do I copy it? Export. Copy as markdown. All right, let's see if it were the other one. Brainstorm. Choose. History. Objective. Profiles. Projects. Scoreboard. Okay, looks like about everything. Thank you for sharing the database schema. Now I have a clear understanding of your database setup structure. It's extremely valuable information to properly plan the Based on the schema, I see that you've implemented a complete database that follows the module-based approach described in the PDR with some important differences from what I initially assumed. Exactly. This is exactly my point. Your data has these key tables. Module-specific tables instead of generic this. Supporting tables. Project history profiles, project settings. Common fields across all module tables. Revised project milestones. With this database structure in mind, let's revise the project milestones. Okay, so it's authentication framework. Implement Supabase authentication. Create login, sign up components. Set up sign user. Okay, so then what we're going to do is revise component architecture based on your actual database schema. Okay, let's get started. So now what we're going to do is I'm just going to copy this and I'm going to stop sharing this. Now we're going to jump back into this document over here. So let's jump. Now what we're going to do here is what we want to do is create a series of objectives. So each sprint is going to be based on an objective. Now, of course, probably the best way to do it is to just paste it into here. And I'm not going to do this in front of, well, I'll do it for the first one. So the first thing I'm going to do is find and replace those. Replace all. And then next I'm going to find and replace these. All right, does that look better? I'm going to find and I'm going to just put a space after it. It doesn't seem to care if I put a space after it. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we got sprint database structure analysis. Your database has these key tables, supporting tables, common fields, revised project milestones. So the whole point of an objective is milestones. Remember the first version or earlier version was objective, this section was actually called milestone and scoreboard. I changed it to objectives because it's like not everybody understands the word milestone, and objectives, it applies to more situations. It's more basic, which means it can be used in more situations. All right, so then what we're going to do is each one of these is going to be a separate objective. Well, this obviously is not going to go there. So we're putting a line between each of these because there's going to be a separate objective in each one. Now let's go back up. Well, here's 4, here's 5. So what does this say? Okay, so based on your actual database schema, review component architecture. Based on your database schema, authentication components, project management components, navigation and history components, module framework components. So it's just listing all the components. Now we don't need that information. Okay, so all we have is 5 final integration. Well, let's just put it here for now. so we can do it quicker. It's going to be objective, objective, and then final integration. Is that part of this? Looks like it's part of step 5. All right. Maybe I'll just copy and paste it. Maybe it'll be faster if I do that. 4. And then we got 3, and we got 2, and then 1. All right. So I don't know. Do I need this? No, I don't really need this revised project milestone concept. Okay, so provide authentication sprint 1. And then what we're going to do is we're going to just take this section and authentication framework. See, the biggest problem I have is that, like, when I work with ChatGPT, and I guess now with Cursor, I'm guessing that at some point we're going to be working on something, and then I'm going to be like, "Hey, cool, what's the next sprint, or what's the next step?" And it's going to be like, it has to go through all the context of what we talked about in the past and figure out where it is. But this way, I can just like copy and paste. I can say, "Look, we're working on this, and we've done these ones, and what's the next step in this process?" These are not O's; these are touch base. All right. Now I'm going to put this into future. There actually isn't a future in my app. There's history. Now we can remove the how to create a sign-up form. Start with creating all the components, put it into ChatGPT, ask ChatGPT a file of components, how to open my computer and start working. Can you react? Okay, all of this is going to be deleted. So these 2 touch base items can be deleted. All right. So what did we do? We connected Cursor to Supabase. Then after that, it was able to finally understand the database, and then it gave me that plan. And so the plan, step 1, sprint 1, is the foundation and authentication. Then here's step 2, 3, 4, 5 of the objectives. Now in this foundation objective, then we have the first thing we're going to do is the, what is it, authentication framework. So we want to pull these into the touch base over here. I would actually prefer if they're kind of 1. And why? Because am I organizing it incorrectly, or what's the deal with that? Well, it's mainly because I'm using a Google Doc. And because I'm using the Google Doc, it's just a little bit easier if I put this all in the same block of text, because I can't move so easily around, because I have to read down and read down and read down. And I think this chunk is good. So what are you working on? What are you going to do today? So what are you working on? I'm working on all this stuff. And then what are you working on today? So we're going to put a current. We're currently working on authentication framework. And what are you going to do today? We're going to implement Supabase authentication. And what do you need help with? What are some potential sources of help? Can we update a status? All right, so now the thing is that the problem I have now with this specific experience is that I don't actually know the tasks. I don't actually know what I need to do. In general, the task is simple. So what's the task list and how am I going to get help? So I can talk to ChatGPT and tell it that these are the sprints and we want to create a prompt for cursor to begin with the authentication framework item 1. Okay, so then what do we do? So I'm going to go back to cursor and then I'm going to go back to, I'm going to copy the thing that cursor just output because it output everything, like all the components and everything. Okay, so let's jump into ChatGPT. All right, so I got cursor to read the database and the product requirement document, and it gave me this output. That's not true. Below is the complete SQL file that represents the current revised state of your database, followed by plain English version explanation. You can copy and paste. Jeez, that did not happen. I asked cursor to read the database from Supabase and the PDR. From our previous work, you also have access to that data. Work as a project manager and review the output which cursor gave me below concerning sprints and components. Review the work and then give orders for the project architect and developers so that they can begin sprint 1. Here is the cursor plan to review. Okay, overview of Sprint 1 foundational things. Sprint 1 is focused on building an essential groundwork for our MVP. We must ensure that our users can securely sign up, log in, their profiles include startup properly, authentication framework setup, Supabase authentication, create test setup, login, auth form components, integrate error handling and loading status, user profile integration, ensure that after sign up a corresponding record. Okay, project structure. Okay, those are some good questions. See what I'm saying? My ChatGPT keeps messing up. Based on our project requirements or previous discussion, we're currently using a centralized global state using React context. This approach is simple, built in, is fully adequate for our MVP. It will allow us to share across components without overhead. This looks like Redux. Below our recommended list of components we can use. GitHub is version control. Your React lives on your local machine. Okay. You commit your code to Git repository hosted on GitHub. Every time you push changes to GitHub, it keeps track of your project history, enables the collaboration and version rollback. Vercel deployment. Vercel is connected to your GitHub repository. When you push a commit to your GitHub repo, Vercel automatically builds and deploys your app. Your app then becomes accessible via your live URL, your custom domain, or a Vercel provided URL. Connect everything, local development. You can develop your local app testing it here, and then GitHub commits, and then Vercel picks up the changes and builds it, puts it into your website in variables. The GitHub repo, configure environment variables such as React Supabase so that your deployment can connect to Supabase. Working with Cursor. When using Cursor, begin to generate code. Ensure that your local app is set up connected to GitHub and that use Supabase connection via Supabase client environment. Cursor provide clear prompt. Generate React components named auth. Component filled emails, password, create, paste, and generate code. Create file. Yeah, exactly. So we're trying to create the auth form component. Generate a React component named auth form that provides both sign-in and login functionality using Supabase authentication. Should use fields. Proper error handling. Use Supabase sign-in for this. Also generate basic auth party using React context management authentication signal. This prompt instruct Cursor based on this and this. You can paste. Okay, next step. What do you have? React app Supabase working. Do you have your local React app connected to Supabase? Working correctly. Cursor generate auth form. So it's all right. I'm just going to cut and paste this into Cursor. So in Cursor, I wrote, do you have your local React app connected to Supabase? It says, I don't have access to tools or ability to check if your local React app is connected to Supabase. I can't verify if your Supabase client is working correctly since I can't run the test code directly. If you check your React app is properly connected to Supabase, you would need to verify that Supabase is correctly configured in your Supabase URL API key. Test a simple query. Check, okay. Okay, so like, would you like to help you find a test function that will run your verified script? Yes. Okay, so now let's just jump back. Cursor. Cursor says, so I said, you have the React app connected to Supabase. And it says, no, I can't do that. And would you like me to help you test functions to run it to verify it? And I just said, yes. So the question is, do I need to actually to deploy to GitHub or to Vercel? Not really. Not right now. So this is like the conversation I had with Roboslav, because he was like, well, you don't actually have to connect to Supabase right now. You can build everything and then it will connect later. And I was like, well, no, because I want it to read my database. I want it to understand my database before we start creating code. Now I also need to connect to GitHub and Vercel first. No, so why? Because the database, I need the database, but I don't necessarily need because I'm not deploying it to the URL. And my understanding is GitHub means that I have something that functions, like it works. So once it's working in local environment, then I'm going to put it into GitHub, and then GitHub, I'm going to use Vercel to deploy it into the URL. And then I got a website and it's working. But I don't have anything to put into GitHub. So that means I don't need to worry about Vercel or the URL. But I do need Supabase to be connected into my local environment, so that when I communicate with my local environment, then, okay, so now I'm going to go back to ChatGPT while it's working on that. So then probably what I want to do is I'm just waiting for this accept all. It says you created a test component to verify your Supabase connection. What it's done, create a Supabase connection. Test if connection is working, checks if the tables are accessible, displays list of up to 5 projects if they exist, creates a new page at test connection, update, fix link to components, verify if the development server is now running. Visit this one in your browser. The page will show if the connection Supabase is successful, the table is accessible. Okay, so that means I need to go back to my React app and nothing. All right, so I'm gonna copy and paste the errors that I got in the local environment. Okay, so I'm just going to be doing a lot of copy and pasting for the next little while because it's doing error fixes, which means that, okay, let's go back to ChatGPT because I still have that one question. Because ChatGPT is basically saying that, well, it's asked Cursor to generate the auth form. And I think the question I asked was like, do you want to create all the components first? Yeah, so, okay, look, so here's all the components. I'm back onto this question. Based on our requirements, this is the built-in. Okay, so I'd like that recommendation of components again to give to Cursor and give it, yeah. What's the best way for it to manage the creation and handling of components in the code and within the context of the project? I'm going to just check if your Supabase connection is working, which table is accessible. All right, I'm going to click over to. See, I'm afraid to click away from ChatGPT because I always have problems when I click away. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull the React app out. Good. Then I can copy and paste the error message while at the same time still being able to see this. What's going on? See, even, yeah, anyways. I can see something's happening with React in the background because now I have another window open. Component architecture. Authentication components, auth. All right. Good, so it's working on that. When using Cursor, provide the above component overview with which components you want to generate. For example, you might prompt generate components. For each component, you'll then generate the code, paste the code, integrate and test. deploy. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to copy this. Airplane project management Supabase connection test failed to connect to Supabase. So here's what I'm seeing with the local thing. I'm going to take this error message. I'm going to run it in cursor. I see that the error you're encountering in Supabase connection. Let's troubleshoot. The error message cannot read properties undefined reading from suggests that Supabase client object isn't being properly created or imported. Let's check a few things. Let's fix Supabase.js file to ensure correctly creating the client. Now let's update the Supabase connection component to use our updated Supabase client. Let's also make a simple test script to verify the Supabase connection from the command line. Let's run this test script to check the Supabase connection from the command line. Great news, the command line test shows that your Supabase connection is working correctly. All the tables are accessible. Let's also verify the Reaction version you're using. It might be too recent for some of our code. I see the issue now. You're using React 19, which is the very recent version. Let's downgrade to a more stable version to ensure compatibility. Now, let's make one more change to simplify how we set up the Supabase client. Let's try running the application again. All right, now does the npm start? Okay, I've made several changes to fix the Supabase connection issue. Fixed the Supabase client setup, downgraded React, verified Supabase connectivity with command line test, enhanced error reporting with Supabase connection component. The command line test clearly shows that your Supabase connection is working correctly, so the issue is likely how the React component was trying to access the Supabase client. Your application should now be running and successfully connecting to Supabase. If you're still experiencing issues, check the browser console for any error. All right. Successfully connected to Supabase. Nice. All right, so that means we're going to come back here. We're going to recopy this. Copy. I'm going to sharing here. I'm going to share on cursor. Cursor. Where are you, cursor? And then I'm going to click. Now I'm going to stop this. I'm going to click components. All right. I don't need any of this stuff now. Add context. Files, folders, components, and then paste this. And what do you think about my recommended component architecture? Give it a grade between 1 and 10. I mean, I'm fine with agent. Okay. I'll review the recommended component architecture, provide a grade along with detailed feedback. Your component architecture demonstrates strong understanding of both the PRD requirement and the Supabase database structure. Let me break down the strengths. Excellent modularity, database alignment, reusability, state management consideration, data fetching, error handling, performance consideration, specific recommendations, adding local states. Your component structure is well aligned. Okay, now we're going to go back to ChatGPT. This is called dueling pianos. All right. I'll review the recommended component architecture and provide overall grade. Your component architecture demonstrates strong understanding. I asked my software architecture friend to grade your work. Here is his feedback. Do you agree? What is still missing? So this is called dueling pianos. So I just take the feedback from one type. So the other one is Sonnet. The other one is Claude 3.7 Sonnet. And then we're coming back into ChatGPT o3 Mini High. And so it gets the feedback, and then it's like, oh, okay, that's interesting feedback. And then it's gonna, make some recommendations. I agree with your friend's assessment. Architecture is solid, well thought out, but there's definitely some gaps we need to address before moving forward. Agreement. Areas for improvement, what's missing. Error handling, performance considerations, loading states, next steps in order to incorporate improvement in grid data server layer. Okay. All right, so then what we're going to do is, all right, we got this. We're going to jump back into cursor. We're going to put this in here. I agree with your assessment. Our artworks are solid, well thought out. There's definitely some agreement. Data alignment, reusability, state areas for improvement, and recommendations. And send. You made some excellent points about our architecture strengths and areas what we need to address. Let's turn these insights into concrete implementation, starting with the data fetching, error handling, and loading states. Okay, so I got another meeting, so I gotta go. But let's catch up with this tomorrow. Custom hook for project. I have no idea what it's talking about now, so we'll just talk about this later. Bye-bye.